Slippers, coat hangers, rulers, violent words, or cold silence. We've all seen jokes online about the measures Chinese parents will take when their child is misbehaving, not finishing their homework, not getting straight A's, letting Xiaoming next door win the piano competition.
That's enough. You're triggering my PTSD. Dear listeners, welcome back to our podcast. I'm your host, Hong.
And I'm your host, Lexi.
I hope Lexi's introduction didn't give you too much of a scare, but you may have guessed it. Today, we'll be exploring discipline, specifically how parent-child discipline has affected family bonds and dynamics in contemporary families of the People's Republic of China.
We'll first explain the nature and evolution of Chinese child discipline, as well as the different forms of it. Then, we'll be joined by Mr. Cyrus Cho and Ms. Ivy Tan from the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Hong Kong for a deeper dive into how discipline is so intertwined with different aspects of the Chinese society.
Let's get started. Family has always been the cornerstone of Chinese society, embodying traditions, values, and discipline passed down through generations. But over the past few decades, China's family structure has undergone profound transformations.
Of course, I can kind of feel that change going on.
Absolutely. Over the past 4 decades, China's family structure has transformed significantly. Household size have shrunk from an average of 4.4 people in 1982 to just 3.09 by 2010. Nuclear family remain dominant but are declining, while single-person and elderly-only households are rising rapidly.
I see what you mean, but how would these changes affect family bonds? I mean, it is obvious that there are fewer members in family nowadays.
Yes, first, smaller households means fewer intergenerational interactions. Traditionally, multi-generational living allowed grandparents to assist with childcare and discipline. Now, with only 21.9% of households having elderly members and many living alone, the support system weakens, which means parents in nuclear families bear sole responsibility for discipline, which can strain relationships without extended family buffers.
Yes, I just remember how I was so jealous of my friend having a lovely grandma who gives him so much support all the time.
Exactly. However, by 2010, nearly 40% of elderly households were empty nests. This physical separation reduces daily contact, altering how discipline and emotional bonds are maintained. Elder children may resort to financial support rather than hands-on care, reshaping traditional filial piety.
That is sad to hear, and makes me curious, what is the driving force behind all these changes?
The one factor would be urbanization. Modern developed cities are attracting young migrants for all kinds of reasons. Better living environment, higher salaries, fresh new and diverse community to name some.
For sure. I do enjoy the convenience of living in a big city as well.
And the consequence of this trend of migration is creating more and more single-person households. In fact, 17.2% of Shanghai's households in 2010 are single-person households. These individuals delay marriage and parenting, prioritizing careers over family formation. When they do have children, they are often geographically distant from grandparents, limiting cultural transmission and shared disciplinary practices.
I guess this is understandable as there is probably more pressure working in distant cities alone. And talking about delaying marriage, have you heard of this interesting new concept called DINK households?
Yes, the rise of DINK, double-income no-kids households, and delaying childbearing reflects shifting values. Younger generation prioritize autonomy, while elder expect traditional healthcare and family care. This tension is evident in rural areas, where 55% of elder-only households lack daily family support. Without mediation, discipline methods may clash. For example, some strict versus permissive approaches.
Does that mean we're going to lose the Chinese tradition in child raising? Or maybe it is a chance for us to embrace some new modern family discipline?
It is obvious that family bonds are becoming more fragmented, with 30 million elderly-only households and fewer children per family. The state must supplement care roles once held by families. Parent-child dynamics may grow more transactional, emphasizing financial support over emotional cohesion. Policymakers need to address these gaps to preserve familial stability. Well, dear listeners, now let's take a deep dive into how discipline actually works in Chinese families beyond the stereotypes.
That's right, Hong. Discipline isn't just strict or lenient. It's way more nuanced. Research really backs this up. Chinese parents actually use a whole mix of strategies. For example, shaming, reasoning, giving instructions, even letting kids exercise more autonomy, all sometimes in one single moment.
Yeah, and if you think of those classic Western parenting labels, they actually don't fit too well. Instead, in China, concepts like 管, that's to govern, and 管教, or educate through discipline, are what really shape how parents act.
Exactly, and it gets even more interesting. 管教 isn't just about being strict or controlling. For example, parents might start by reasoning with their kid, but if that doesn't work, maybe they'll turn to shaming. Sometimes they even use opportunity education, that is basically using mistakes as a chance for a moral lesson. It all depends on the situation. I mean, it's super adaptive.
That makes a lot of sense. And yet, the tiger mom stereotype really sticks in people's mind, right? There's this assumption that Chinese parents are just authoritarian, that relies on physical discipline.
Oh, totally. But here's what the most recent research actually shows. Especially urban middle-class families, there's a real move away from those tiger mom ways. Parents are shifting toward emotional support and encouraging autonomy, not just control. A big part of this is due to the modernization and the wish to prepare kids for the life in today's modern China.
That's interesting. So, is this shift policy-driven?
You might think it's policy-driven, but it's not that simple. Even though we have things like the one-child policy and new child protection laws, studies actually show that these big policies don't always shape day-to-day discipline the way we'd expect.
Yeah, the gap between broad policy and reality at home is always tricky. Plus, with China opening up and globalization, we're seeing a mix. Some families combine Confucian values with more Western-style independence, but old habits sometimes pop up too, like expecting total obedience in public even if there's more debate at home.
Absolutely. And, fun fact, in Beijing, for instance, research found that grandparents often still stick to the old ways, using physical discipline. Generational dynamics are a big deal here, you see.
Can totally see that. Grandparents often hold authority and perpetuate obedience, so no surprise there's a clash of ideals between generations.
Now, let's talk about the impact. Home, do you think that these discipline styles actually change the family bonds?
To me, they do for sure. Studies connect more autonomy, supportive discipline to warmer family relationships. Kids are more open, and trust grows much easier.
Makes sense. On the flip side, when parents default to power tactics, it tends to reinforce hierarchy instead of true connection, sometimes at the cost of a worse parent-child relationship.
And let's not forget, discipline isn't just about shaping behavior. It actually plays a big role in identity. Some research, and it matched my own experience too, suggests that when parents see their child as developing agent and give affirmation like, "You are mature enough to handle this," it boosts self-confidence and self-worth.
Love that. But, what about in rural or migrant families, where traditional methods might stick around more? Are those kids internalizing more shame instead?
Good question. Most of research has focused on middle-class, urban families. We really need way more study about left-behind kids, rural families, or ethnic minorities.
Totally. Collecting that kind of data isn't easy either. Even since the 2016 anti-domestic violence law, there's barely any evidence on whether real family discipline has changed behind the closed doors.
It really highlights the need for more intersectional research. There's still a lot we don't know.
For now, the big takeaway is that Chinese family discipline isn't static. It's always changing, blending old and new, with real consequences for family trust, bonds, and self-identity shaping.
Well put. There's always more to uncover as family and society keep evolving.
So true. Hon, let's keep exploring. Next up.
Well, now, let's turn to our first guest today, Mr. Choi.
It's a pleasure to join you two on this podcast.
We invited Mr. Choi on today to speak about the relationship between gender roles and disciplinary practices. Mr. Choi, growing up, I always felt like my parents were easier on my sister than me. Could you start by explaining if children are disciplined differently based on gender?
There have been studies involving giving children questionnaires which have found that boys are disciplined more physically than girls. I cannot say what the definite reason for this difference is, but there are many conjectural explanations. For example, one study shows that fathers are more protective for their daughters than sons.
I knew it. I was so unfair how my sister got away with a scolding while I always got the coat hanger.
Well, maybe you're just a naughtier one and it had nothing to do with gender. Let's also know that this trend is in no way absolute. Scroll through social media a little and you'll find plenty of counterexamples. I saw a post the other day on Weibo where the poster took pity on their neighbor's daughter, who they overheard being disciplined every night, presumably due to homework. You've also heard of Xiao Baiyou, right?
Of course I have.
For you listeners who haven't, he's a Chinese father who went viral a few years ago for penning a book boasting of raising 3 children admitted to the prestigious Peking University. How? By employing discipline harsh enough to earn him the title of Wolf Dad by the media. No doubt one thing adding to the controversy surrounding him, though, was how not even his daughters were spared from his draconian approach, which included ruthless beatings and restrictions surrounding what friends to make.
But his books sold like hotcakes, right? I guess that shows not everyone believes sons and daughters should treat it differently.
Indeed. Since we brought up the Wolf Dad, let's also discuss gender on the side of the parents in discipline. I also think another aspect of Xiao Baiyou's approach that many Chinese people subscribe to is the delegation of disciplinary roles between parents of each gender. Xiao Baiyou said in an interview with South China Morning Post that, "My wife agreed when she was carrying my first child that I would be in charge of education, so she would not interfere when I taught my children a lesson or punished them. When that was done, she was responsible for coddling them, comforting them, and applying cream where I spanked them." End quote.
Well, the good cop, bad cop strategy has its use in discipline.
Of course, while fathers tend to be the harsher disciplinarians in Chinese society, many Chinese youth are also familiar with the archetype of the tiger mother, again showing how there is no absolute trend between gender and household disciplinary norms. In Chinese culture, the strict mother who cows both her children and husband alike is an image so pervasive that it commonly features in fictional media too. One example that comes to mind is the protagonist's mother in the children's cartoon Xiaoming and Wang Mao.
I remember seeing Xiaoming and Wang Mao as a child. The carefree Xiaoming struggle with stifling family discipline, and school life resonate with me very deeply.
It undoubtedly left an impression on many children of how it spoke against the school system's perpetuation of restrictive standards of success in Chinese society. I'll conclude my time today by pointing out the role of child discipline in perpetuating gender norms, which Xiaoming and Wang Mao also depicts. Remember the part where Xiaoming's father tells him to apologize to his mother even though he's in the right because gentlemen are gracious towards women? It's important to remember that the relationship between child-raising norms and social factors like gender goes both ways. Research suggests that children learn to conform to gender roles in the process of discipline. There's a study concerning parental discipline styles on child aggression, which found that maternal warmth made less aggressive daughters, but not sons, while paternal assertive discipline made aggressive sons, but not daughters. Children clearly are influenced differently by parents of each gender, which has implications for gender stereotypes. Let's say violent discipline from fathers is the norm, then rowdiness in boys who learn from their fathers more would be the norm in society, while girls would be less aggressive, a trend that would generate gendered expectations surrounding child aggression. This example shows how discipline can generate the gender stereotypes which then in turn affect disciplinary norms.
Fascinating. Thank you, Mr. Choi, for bringing attention to how these two factors of gender and disciplinary method are interconnected.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Hon and Cyrus. Thank you for your time. Today, we're also invited Miss Tan to join our discussion. Welcome, Miss Tan. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Could you share some additional factors that influence how parents discipline their children?
Yes, research shows that a family's ability to provide resources for their children, and it's what we call socioeconomic status, plays a crucial role in their disciplinary methods. And I'd like to share some insights into how these approaches differ across social classes.
That's such an interesting perspective. You shall begin.
Yeah, absolutely. Low middle-class families can offer children a comfortable environment to study, but parents may still find it difficult to offer more allied academic resources. As a result, they tend to enforce strict discipline to make sure that their children keep up with schoolwork, since school may be the most accessible path to success for them. Lexi, are you familiar with the Chinese saying 不打不成器?
Of course. It means that spare the rod and spoil the child, right?
Exactly. These parents often believe strict discipline, for example, enforcing homework, limiting distractions, or even physical punishment, are the only way to regulate their children so that they can study hard for competitions and examinations in Gaokao. But research shows this can create emotional distance. The child may excel academically, yet feel their parents only value achievements but not them.
Absolutely. I'll see many heartbreaking posts on Chinese social media where teens say, "Oh, my parents love my grades, not me." Does this create a fundamental tension in parent-child relationships, do you think?
Yeah, actually, many Chinese parents from low or middle socioeconomic backgrounds are also like, and got headaches in how to discipline or educate children. I have read many similar posts and comments on Little Red Book, a popular social media platform in China. Many netizens pointed out that they had no choice but to discipline children in a relatively harsh way due to their children's low concentration. But that's not what they truly want, right? Therefore, we may see that parents also feel helpless when educating children.
I see that. Well, is it possible that the situation will be better in higher income families?
Good question. Researchers have indeed found that parents with higher socioeconomic background are the least likely to conduct physical punishment, but instead prefer open communication and the provision of supportive resources for their children. However, but here's the twist, even wealthy families sometimes cling to traditional Chinese values. For example, have you watched the movie 抓娃娃 last year?
Sure. It's very popular at that time and invoked a heated discussion online. I remember that it told a story about a pair of parents from a super rich family who instead lied to their children that they were poor so that their children could be able to endure poverty and hardships from their childhood.
Yes, and after the movie was on in theaters, netizens on China's social network Weibo conducted a hot discussion about the misery of the Chinese-style family education, and we call it like 中式教育 after watching the film. They made a complaint about the parents in the film for not respecting their child's sports dream, but instructed their son strictly to follow their anticipated paths and entered a good profession in a good college. Therefore, they're doubting whether suffering education is really that necessary for a child to grow into talents.
That's such a profound question for a society.
Yeah, so I have also been researching on how to balance the fear of spoiling children and the necessity of more communicative education instead of harsh discipline in socioeconomic status families, and how the middle-class families could offer more high-quality resources, for example, like the chance to broaden their children's horizons instead of cultivating their children into a kind of stubborn learning machine.
Thank you so much, Ivy, for sharing your expertise with us today. It is super insightful.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Dear listeners, it looks like we've come to the end of our time today. We hope that our podcast has helped you understand what parent-child discipline looks like in Chinese society, and also made you realize that the form discipline takes on in a family is affected by social factors like gender and socioeconomic status.
Right. On the other hand, discipline is also an important tool for passing down the cultural norms so integral in our society, particularly in collectivistic ones like China. In this manner, disciplinary norms also exert a significant influence on the social factors that shape them.
In this age where parents are being influenced by media of all forms, the concept of discipline has grown more and more diverse. What do you all think it should look like in a well-adjusted family? Leave a comment below with your opinion.
As always, remember to like and subscribe to our channel to catch our next week's episode. Until next time,
Bye.